welcome to the Newsx Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, this week we're taking a look at what happened in Venezuela and also the larger message really. Is this just a regional episode or is this the way power is being exercised today? This is, of course, the American part of the course. We saw it happening in Afghanistan. We saw it happening in Iran. We're also seeing the Russian action in Ukraine. So is this the way the new world order is going to be shaping up? I have joining me on the discussion. I have with me Ambassador Ajay Bisaria. He's been an ex-envoy to Canada, Pakistan, Poland, and Lithuania. He's also written a book, Anger Management, on Indo-Pak, and he's also is currently a corporate strategic advisor. I have Ambassador Singh. He's been the Indian ambassador to Iran and the UAE, and Dr. Sanjaya, writer and economist, currently a distinguished senior fellow at the Takshila Institute, and he's been a former media advisor to Dr. Manmohan Singh. Ajay, I'll begin with you. Given the situation in Venezuela and the way the the new Trumpian order is, are you surprised and what should we expect next?
Well, the surprise was the timing and the suddenness of the operation, but it should really have been no surprise that there would be action on Venezuela, because this is something that the right-wing conservative manifesto had very much on top of its list. And this was the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, which was published in 2023. And that said that the next US president should prioritize action on Venezuela, Iran. It also named China and Russia and DPRK. But this has been on the cards because they said it has a communist regime and so on. And then, if we had any doubts, it was clarified by the national security strategy published in December, which talked of the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, what is now being called the Donroe Doctrine, which was about securing the Western Hemisphere. But I think now, with the Venezuela operation and the post-Venezuela comments, it's quite clear that there are other countries on the horizon. So, we had a Trumpian administration in 2025, which took hard power actions in at least 7 or 8 instances, actually using missiles in places like Yemen and Iran and even Nigeria. But now we have a situation where they are saying that the similar action could be taken in other places, and they've named Colombia, Cuba, and also in the hemisphere, then Greenland next. And so there is definitely a focus this year on hard power actions to secure US supremacy, first in the Western Hemisphere. And I would argue that without really withdrawing completely from other theaters, because the threat to Iran is what Ambassador Singh will understand better, is also in another theater. So I don't think the US is completely withdrawing from other theaters, but certainly focusing for now on the Western Hemisphere.
Master Singh, will you take this thought forward? Is there sort of a division? The US takes its spoils, Russia takes its spoils, China takes its spoils, and where does India really stand in this?
I think we're caught in the middle, and we have a problem. Trade deal is still not finalized. Then we saw Trump holding forth in the plane where he said, they're trying to please me, and so on and so forth. So he's just not concerned whether the Indian government is embarrassed or not embarrassed. He's just carrying on. I think India's, and you get it in the same NSS, which came on December 4-5. India is just a corollary in the Asian approach. Where the Asian segment is there, they talk of Indo-Pacific. And India is seen as only facilitating in the Indo-Pacific. There's no separate role for India as far as America can see. It's a regional role, and the way they've lifted up Pakistan very clearly, they want a different kind of balance in South Asia. They're not accepting India's dominance. And to balance that, I think they pulled up America, pulled up Pakistan. So it's a different world. We've gone probably back to 1947. And I think it's embarrassing for BJP because they don't know how to deal with it. The whole thing was based right from after the nuclear tests that India had, where the Indo-US relationship hit a bottom, all prime ministers, Vajpayee and then Manmohan Singh, etc., they all basically accepted that excellent relations with America, as much as America thought excellent relations with India, were critical to handling the rise of China, Indo-Pacific security in the area. That role of India seems to be not in Trump's mind important. America's, of course, Monroe Doctrine has been talked about, though he's inverted it. The original Monroe Doctrine was because the Americans said the colonial powers had no business to intervene in Latin America after decolonization. So that they were trying to protect the independence of the newly independent Latin American countries, whereas Trump is trying to have colonial control of the independent countries. So that just leaves Brazil, Mexico, Colombia is going after. And you see the very fact that India was very late in reacting to it, and then we kind of came, because you don't know how exactly India is caught between its old position. They haven't devised a new position. They don't know whether they should confront America. But certainly so-called leadership of global South is now questionable, because we don't take a position on this. What is the standing you have with the developing world or with the rest of the countries? Because you were seen as a leader during the non-aligned movement. You spoke up for all of them, for Africa, for the others, and you positioned yourself between Russia, Soviet Union, and the Americans. So in a new world, I think we'll have to carve a position, and just being silent on America and letting America do what they want, I don't think that's going to help. And the Europeans are realizing the same. They've realized that with Greenland now in play, they're finally saying that that'll be the end of NATO. Till now, they thought they could humor Trump. They went to America, largely put up with his, with his extremist views. And on Ukraine, they managed to contain Zelensky and say, humor him, don't take him on. So the approach so far was, let's not confront him, which is what India was doing, which is what Europe was doing. But now we are seeing what's happening to Europe. Tomorrow he may do the same thing. He's already begun doing it in South Asia. Now Bangladesh, if another not so friendly government comes up and you find Americans very friendly with them, and the Pakistani is leading it, then you'll be back to pre-71. So you'll have to think it. So what you need is, and I've written about it, you need consensus at home. BJP has to change its approach, and you need consensus at home. You can't take up a Bangladesh player and really have it affect your foreign policy and approach to Bangladesh just because he's playing the IPL. I mean, you're allowing your domestic policy, your domestic politics to seriously affect your foreign policy. So far, BJP was able to keep them separate. But I think now it's very difficult with Trump around. Our only hope is Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court on Friday is giving the ruling on the tariffs. If they say he has no power to impose those tariffs, there'll be a setback. He needs a setback. And then, of course, in Congress, fortunately, it's wrong to say fortunately, one Republican congressman has died, one has resigned, one election is due in Texas. So the gap, even in the current House, will be just one seat. And once that happens, I think the House they have to take back power from Trump. You can't leave it where it is. And otherwise, he'll mess around with the world till the midterms or beyond.
Dr. Mao, the larger message of Trump messing around, and Dr. K.C. Singh's Ambassador K.C. Singh puts it, how does that impact, and how are we handling it?
Well, just as K.C. has said about domestic politics impinging on our foreign policy, which is, I agree with him, very unfortunate. I think there is an element of that even in the United States, with Trump's standing going down, his popularity rating going down, and the midterm elections coming up in 2026. I think he's using these foreign external interventions as a way of boosting his image. But let me take a view slightly different from a lot of the writing I find in the Indian media. I don't think that this action in Venezuela is actually a symbol of growing American power. It is a symbol, in fact, of declining American power, because regime change in the past by the United States was imposed more decisively with great failures, whether in Vietnam or in Afghanistan or in Iraq. Many of these interventions didn't go in the way in which the US hoped them to go. And I don't think in Venezuela the intervention has been crafted in a manner in which it will ultimately benefit the United States. Because what it does, and as it has happened even in West Asia, is that popular opinion becomes hostile. How long do you have regimes in these countries controlling the popular opinion when it has become so hostile to the United States? And in general, there is anti-American hostility in the Latin American region. It's always been the case. So I don't see this Venezuela operation as some great regime change operation that in the long run is going to allow the United States to control the future destiny of Venezuela. I think the events of the last few days suggest that that is an open question. The fact that he has only removed Maduro and not been able to really effect a change in the regime, we have to wait and see how this regime behaves. And if in the course of time, things do not move very much in favor of the United States in South America, then questions will arise as to what was the reason for this intervention. I think one important reason obviously was American domestic politics. And it's probably also meant to scare the Europeans. But, as Casey again has said, this has united the Europeans. I mean, the Europeans were lapdogs of the Americans in the last 2 years, worried about Ukraine and Russia, and left out of the game when Putin met Trump in Alaska. Europe has suddenly found some courage to stand up, and even someone like Giorgia Meloni has had to affix her signature to the European statement on Greenland. So, I think really the outcome of this need not be as disastrous for the world as many seem to imagine at the moment, because in some ways, Trump has also exposed the weaknesses of the United States in the emerging global balance of power. He has not been able to get what he wants in Ukraine vis-a-vis Putin. He has not been able to get his way with the Chinese. He has not been able to really get his way in Latin America. And I don't see him really picking up a fight with Cuba or Colombia. The people on the street in these countries are anti-American. And I think you have to understand that it's not simply enough to remove one top guy and then think the whole country is with the United States. Plus, United States itself is divided. Look at the Democratic Party, from Nancy Pelosi to Bernie Sanders to Mamdani. So many Democratic leaders have now come out against Trump. So this is going to play into the local politics of the US. Finally, I would agree again with Casey that I think it's put us in a very bad light. I think Indian reaction has been dismal. All kinds of defenses are being offered by columnists, I find, trying to explain away the government's kind of timid response. I don't buy that. I think we declared ourselves as a kind of voice of the global South during our chairmanship of G20. And here is an opportunity to be voice of the global South. And we have yielded that space to South Africa and to China. They are voicing the interests of the global South. The whole of Latin America is the global South. And what is our position on American hegemonism in Latin America? When I've written a column saying we ought to have questioned this Donroe Doctrine. There are people in India saying, oh, but that's a different part of the world. We have nothing to do with that part of the world. Why should we be commenting on some, these doctrines? No, I'm sorry. Because it's an enunciation of a policy by a country of importance to us. And we need to take a view. And I don't think in this day and age, we can accept a doctrine that defines, that legitimizes the hegemonistic ambitions of one power. And what does it do to opposition on China? I mean, we have been arguing for the last 70 years that China wants to be a hegemon in the region. We want a multipolar Asia. We have criticized Chinese hegemony in Asia, and we have defended American presence in Asia. We said we need the United States in Asia as a counterbalance to China. And now we defend American hegemonism in Latin America. So there is serious questions about how we view the world, how the world will view us. And I think these are all issues that we need to be focused on.
Okay, I'm going to take a break and try and focus on some of the issues that you have raised. Particularly, has this action really helped Trump, or is he going to be facing, what has been the global reaction to it and the reaction back home? Can he ride this through? I'll pose that question to Ambassador Bisaria after a very quick break. Hello and welcome back to the roundtable. We're taking a look at the impact of Trump's actions in Venezuela, and really, Ajay, what is will Trump be able to ride this action through? Has he received? He's got condemnation from the expected quarters, but largely UK has been supportive. From Europe also, I haven't really seen. Spain has been supportive. So, is he hoping to ride this through? Will he be able to?
Yes, so I think we had some very interesting points raised by Sanjay, and I would agree with him that a lot of what Trump is doing is pushed by his domestic politics, by the MAGA base, and so on. What some of the Americans are saying is that the tariff policy of 2025, the Liberation Day, and all that followed, has had a negative impact on the US. Not a very profound negative impact in terms of the economy, but certainly a negative impact. People are hurting. So in 2026, the weapon of choice is the US military forces and not the tariffs. Which Trump was trying to use, and Trump is very well aware of the inflection point of the elections, the midterms, where he has warned the Republicans that if he loses, if the Republicans lose, the Democrats will attempt the third impeachment. They tried twice in his last term. So I think he has a lot of concerns, and he looks at the world in terms of transactions. So he wants to register some wins. But you asked about Europe.
Hmm.
Europe is facing a huge crisis. And we saw that in the last 24 hours, how it played out. There were statements from Greenland, statements from Denmark. There was a meeting in Paris where Zelensky went to meet Macron, and the so called coalition of the willing was present. Um, in for all Trump's destructive activity and rearranging the global furniture, there are two processes that we will have to give him credit for, which probably will be a glimmer of hope in 2026. That we need to reach the end point of the West Asia crisis in terms of some kind of peace deal, and of the Ukraine crisis, which is near the end game. So yesterday, at the Paris meeting, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, were present, and they are hoping to take the European proposals to the Russians and kind of reach some kind of end game there. So that was a positive, even from our point of view, because the tariffs were linked to the sanctions on Russia. The other worry of Europe is Greenland, and that has two scenarios. One is that it's all part of the art of the deal. It's to
Hmm.
push, 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 start with a completely absurd demand, and then say, okay, give me what I want. And that the Danish might give the US, which is get the every Chinese and Russian resource base or military kind of presence out of the region, have a special agreement with the United States, give it privileged access to resources, give it privileged bases, and that might satisfy Trump. Because the other extreme scenario of an invasion, which Stephen Miller and some of the Trump's administration have been talking about, is a nightmare scenario for NATO. It means the end of NATO. Because what it means is that if the Americans attack Greenland and therefore Denmark, another NATO member, then Article 5 kicks in. And if the Danish defend themselves, it again kicks in. They need to come and to the protection of the US on one side and to Denmark on the other. So you will have a bizarre situation where every European country and NATO country will be at war with itself and with every other European country, because in case that happens, it's a scenario not envisaged in the NATO Charter. So I don't think that is going to play out. That's a remote possibility. But with Trump, you never know.
That's really the big question, really here. Ambassador Singh, apart from India, the other reactions globally that Ajay has also talked about, will that encourage Trump to take on Greenland, or is this just bluster now?
No, I think Ajay is largely right because there is already talk of an agreement that US is presenting to Greenland, which is short of occupation, but which essentially gives them, other access to civilian facilities and so on and so forth. But I think let's bring the discussion closer to India. Now, what are the implications of the Monroe Doctrine? It's not something which is just happening in the Americas. I think Israel is trying to copy it. It wants to be the dominant power in West Asia. It used America to attack the nuclear facilities in Iran. There's again talk of another attack being launched, and there are protests in Iran. They want to overthrow the regime. And therefore, once that is done, then Israel is completely dominant. But in the meanwhile, what's happened is the split between Saudi Arabia and UAE. Now, UAE is part of the Abraham Accords. It's been caught cooperating too closely with Israel in occupying the opening in the Gulf of Eden, opening to the Red Sea. And I think that's where the Saudis have stepped in and they said, we will not allow this. And they've got Turks and the Egyptians with them. So the Emiratis are looking, have been quite embarrassed. They don't know how to handle it because they're quite isolated because Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia together are much stronger than the Emiratis. So the whole game of playing along with the Israelis to increase their control around the Gulf of Aden, DP World is already controlling a port there, etc. That I think the Saudis are resisting and probably successfully so, as well as in Yemen. Emiratis wanted South Yemen, a portion of South Yemen, to be liberated and to be their ally. That's not going to happen. So now the other thing is Iran. I've said this before. I had an interview with PTI. I said it a week ago that Iranian regime is not a normal regime that you can just overthrow. It's a combination of the clerical and the military set up there, IRGC. It is not one man. You can't take Maduro out. You take the supreme leader out, it doesn't make any difference. They'll have another supreme leader. But essentially, it's a whole system and collection of institutions which are very difficult to overturn. Now, you've seen the demonstrations. Mossad is definitely penetrating there. We've seen the Mossad presence in the past where they're able to kill senior leaders of IRGC. I think after 10, 12 days, they realized simply by protests, the government is not about to be overthrown. Now you have this contradictory thing. There is one thing coming out that the Israelis have approached Russians to tell Iranians not to launch an anticipatory attack against them. Because the Iranians have said, this time we are not going to wait. If we see the planes up in the air, our missiles are ready, we'll attack Israel. So I think Israel, we don't know finally whether it's going to take on Iran, not going to take on Iran. But if it spreads in the Gulf, it has an immediate implication for India. The 8 million Indians in the Gulf, they are second or third largest trading partner. Oil price will spike. And this is just not good for India. And again, India is nowhere in it. Where are we in the debate? Nowhere. Because you got so close to, you thought just because you got close to Emirati ruling family, Saudi ruling family, Saudi ruling family is now moved closer to Pakistan. So none of this is going to happen. You can't have a superficial link and think that you're going to alter your geopolitical stake in the Gulf. You know, the old thing was you keep your relationship constant with everyone, with West Asia, with the Gulf, and that is how you manage. That's why even when there was the Iran-Iraq war, we continue to have a presence in both the countries because you don't take sides. You don't get too close. No, we'll have an India, Middle East, Europe link. Now, where is that link gone? Nowhere Saudis are going to allow a link to go through there to Israel if they go on killing people in Gaza. So, you know, it's, I think BJP, unfortunately, as I said, domestic politics, you can't be majoritarian at home and deal with Muslims in a particular way and think you can hug Muslims abroad and get away with it. In the meanwhile, those Muslims have also got divided because Israel is playing a game, same game that America is playing in the Americas. Israel wants to play in the Middle East and be the dominant power. Okay. A small country with that population, which is 1/100 the size of Iran, how is going to play a dominant role. You see, even 10 missiles hitting Jerusalem and Tel Aviv can cause more damage than 100 missiles hitting Iran. So I don't know what the game is. People are overplaying their hand. I would say Trump is overplaying his hand, and it's about the peak now, and he'll have to step back. He can't keep doing it.
Well, Dr. Maru, I think that takes us for your theory that Trump has overplayed his hand. But what next? How do you see 26 playing out now, given this?
I'd like to make a larger point because I think we heard very detailed analysis by both Ajay and KC Singh, which I largely agree with. I think there's a larger issue for us from an Indian perspective, which is that the American game, at least Trump's game, appears to be in the manner in which he's dealing with Latin America, Europe, and West Asia, to go back to a more unipolar world in which China is kind of kept within its region. The Russians are weakened, and the United States reemerges as a dominant global power. That seems to be the kind of logic of the Trump's national security strategy, etc. Though he says he's only focused on Western Hemisphere, that's not the real, final end game. The end game that the U.S. hopes would be a reassertion of American unipolar hegemony. And as I've said earlier, I don't think that's the way in which things will develop. But look at it from our point of view. What does it mean for India's relations with other powers? I do believe that it is in India's interest that we have a more bipolar global system than a unipolar one. In other words, that China retains whatever power it has acquired, that Russia retains the power it has acquired, that you need other major global powers in the world. And I think that is where our diplomacy should be aimed in such a way that, as it is true that between 1999, 2000, let's say, and 2015, for 15 years, we believed that a strong relationship with the United States alone was in our interest. But the world has changed. I no longer think a strong relationship with the United States alone is going to serve India's interests. I think India requires an equally strong relationship with Russia and a very stable and a working relationship with China. We need to rework our relationships with these three powers. And I think that's the message, because if Trump is going to become the global policeman, we don't want a global policeman. It does not serve India's interests to have Israel as a regional policeman in West Asia, the United States running around in Latin America and dominating Europe. That's not a world India would serve. I remember Manmohan Singh used to always say that it is in India's interest to seek a global environment that will serve our economic development and our aspirations. And I think that world in which we thought a good relationship with the US alone was important has changed. We need now a world in which we have equally good relations with China and Russia. And I think that is the lesson really I would draw from the way in which Donald Trump has behaved.
Well, thank you so much. On that note, I think in this ever-changing world of Donald Trump, I hope this discussion holds. I think this is a discussion that will hold, in fact, for a while, and we've learned some important lessons from here. So thank you so much for this conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the Newsx YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.